You're missing out on a valuable piece of the equation if you simply limit yourself to a set of if-then rules.
Two traders, Darren and Walter, pull back the curtain on profitable trading systems, consistent money management, and profitable psychological triggers. Welcome to the Two Traders Podcast.
Welcome back to the Two Traders Podcast. Darren's on the line, and we're going to talk about discipline today. So, Darren, this idea of discipline as it regards to trading, what does that make you think of when you think of this concept of discipline?
Yeah, people talk about discipline a lot, and I'm not sure that I completely agree with it, really. Because it's usually put forward that in regards to trading, discipline means basically you should have like your plan set out and then you should follow it to the letter. And I don't really believe that that's a good way to approach trading. And I'll explain why. Because basically if you trade that way, then it means that all of your actions are predetermined, and then there's not any scope in there for you to add new data to your process. That's not a very good way of describing it. Let's say, for instance, you have a predetermined setup where to enter the market. This occurs, and then you have a predetermined stage 2 that you do next. And the idea is, if you're disciplined, then you just follow this through, come what may. And I think that's basically saying that you can't react to what the market does. And for me, a big part of my trading is reacting to what the market has just done and then making a decision based on that. And, I think we kind of have this concept that you can't do that successfully because your emotions will get involved and you'll basically rely on your biases. And yeah, if you're not trading well, or if perhaps you're still learning to trade, then you may well do that. But I think one of the key things to being successful as a trader is that ability to take the new data that you've got, say a market movement, and then not just be emotional about that, then look at that in the context of your plan and the context of what's happening now, and then make your decision. And I think often the discipline idea is pushed that you should kind of be like a machine, basically, and just grind out the plan day after day after day. And I don't think that rings true. And if you look at or if you ever hear people who have algo trading in funds talking about how their algos work, they'll often mention that they have an algo that runs to a set plan, but they are constantly looking at the market and then deciding how they apply that algo. So that's my concern with the discipline. Is it's quite often like a mantra for just doing stage 1 to 6 and not reacting to what's happened.
Yeah, and you've hit it when you talk about the algos or the automated or expert advisor trading, that style of trading, that's always been my argument, that when people say, the reason why I want to automate my system is because I want to take me out of the equation. I want to make sure that the system is followed to a T, that all the rules, all the boxes are ticked, and because I know the system works, I just need to get out of the way and let the computer run it. The argument I've always had with that is that people don't do that. They do exactly what you say, what you just said, which is the overlord gets to decide when to turn the algo on and off, when to adjust it. All this sort of thing happens. So you're still making these trading decisions, even if you say you're an automated trader. And I've had a couple of people who've argued that with me, and a few of them have actually come back years later and said, okay, I get you're right. Because it's true. I mean, we do this sort of thing. We put it in a box and say, okay, this is going to work if we take all of the emotion out of it and make it automated and just structure something that's bulletproof. The problem is, you're still the person that has your finger on the switch. So you're still the one that flips it on and off. And that's the biggest decision of all, really. So, yeah, so I'm with you on that one. But my question for you would be, Darren, if you're thinking about and I agree, I believe that, like this, I call it market biofeedback, where you get this information from the market and then you can apply that to your trade. So you're actually better off in your trade after it's occurred, because you've got more information from the market in the term in whatever form it is. It could be in form of news. If you're a fundamental trader, it could be in the form of more candles on the chart. If you're more of a price action trader like I am, you can kind of use that information. There's a caveat though, because now you're in a position. So the question is, are you going to be able to assimilate that new information after you've pulled the trigger and entered a trade in the right way? Are you going to see everything with a bias, or are you going to see it for, quote, what it is, whatever that means, So that's the tricky part. And so my question for you, Darren, basically is, if this is true, that you get a lot of this information from the charts and you can use that information to adjust or make better decisions for your current open trade, why is it that some traders, they feel like once they're in a trade, they've either got to hit a profit target, or the trailing exit has to get them out of the trade, or they hit their stop loss? Why do they feel like that? Why aren't they more open to adjusting their trade given the new information that's come through on the chart or in the news or whatever? I guess, is it because of this reliance on the rules and discipline, and they just say, well, I don't want to make the wrong decision, so I've got to stick with it. I'm either going to get popped out at a loss, or I'm going to make some profit on this trade?
I think there's probably a few reasons why they want to have those definitive rules. I think, firstly, it takes time to realise that often your decisions are being made purely on what's happened on the chart. But once you've learned, a technique of, really rationalising why you're making a decision and noticing how you're feeling. For instance, let's say you enter the first trade of Monday morning, it shoots 60 pips in your direction in a single bar. You've got a sudden onrush emotions, and it is very easy to just instantly make your decision based off that. I think they want to remove that uncertainty, and people believe the best way to do that is to have definitive rules. I think it's quite hard for people to take on the notion that actually, when you practice and get better at reading your reactions to events in the market, like a trade racing off in your direction, or like a period of losses, actually the best exit is some sort of defined structural exits, and then your reading of the context. Ultimately, that cannot be beaten, because the market isn't like a repeating pattern. There are patterns that appear to repeat and look very similar, but really the best way is to be able to judge your emotions, the level of the emotions you're getting. Is it fear? Is it greed? Use a bit of your experience of when you felt those feelings before, and then you can just make a much better judgment on what action to take. And obviously, if you compare that to saying, if it goes 50 pips, I'll move my break even to 0. If it goes to 100, I take profit. Which one sounds like the simplest way to trade? Which one sounds like the best route to take? Obviously, the simple one with no uncertainty sounds like the best. But long term, if you want to trade really well, you kind of have to go beyond that, I believe, and get much better at accepting the uncertainty, and being able to read your feelings and use them as data.
Yeah, and I think you've hit it. I think that's the difference between a new trader and an experienced trader, is that the new trader is more, to simplify it, really, the new trader is more susceptible to herd psychology, to herd behavior, to crowd psychology, feeling of missing out, the feeling of, it's important to copy others who are successful. As you become more experienced, what typically happens is you focus more inward. It's like Danielson, focus inward. It's sort of this. It's almost like this spiritual thing. And if I were to make one recommendation for people out there who are thinking, okay, that sounds all well and good, Darren and Walter, but what do I do about this? How do I focus? How do I see what's going on? It's difficult for you to take a step out and see yourself. I would say meditation and hypnosis is one really good way. to get in touch with yourself. Another way is to use a simple experiment, it's like a thought experiment or a visualization of seeing yourself as you're taking a trade. So what would it look like if you were outside a window watching you take a trade and watching you manage a poor trade? What would that look like if you were poorly managing the trade? What would you see yourself do? What you're trying to do here is be a little bit more objective in seeing the experiencing, your experiencing of the emotions. Because make no mistake about it, here's the one thing that ruins traders. And it ruined me when I started trading. It was this idea that I needed to exact revenge on the market. So if I lost a position where I took 3 lots, the next trade I'm going to take 6 lots and get all that money back, right? I mean, these are the sorts of things, and I guess this is really where discipline comes from, isn't it? People say you need to be disciplined, and the reason why you need to be disciplined is because otherwise you're going to burn yourself up, and you're going to lose all this money, and you're going to make all these wrong decisions. And that may be true when you start out, as you say, but as you get further along and you've got more experience interacting with the markets and you're actually making money, I think you're right. You're missing out on a valuable piece of the equation if you simply limit yourself to a set of if-then rules. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. I think it needs to be disciplined in how you make your decisions, really. And I think, when you're all calm and everything's going well, then, you make decisions fairly rationally, but at the key times when you've got a lot of profit or when you've had losses and your emotions are heightened, you need to have, like you say, some sort of process where you're noticing that and then not making ill-disciplined decisions based on that. And, I think it's really hard to do. I still suffer myself when, if I've had like a losing spell, 4 or 5 losses on the trot, it's very difficult for, me to take the next trade or, perhaps manage the next trade well. But I've just kind of built a habit in my mind of almost like having a dialogue, like you say, being outside myself. I have a little sort of conversation with myself, this is what I'm feeling now. This is what I want to do. Is that the right thing to do? I'm thinking back and, then I'm going back through experience, no, actually, when I've done that in the past, that's been the wrong thing to do. So, now I've decided on my action and, then I'll take it. A little bit of the problem is when we start to kind of use that approach, we seem to think that we can still get rid of that uncertainty with the exit. It's still like do everything right and it was completely the wrong time to exit. But you just kind of reduce the really bad errors a small percent. And that can make, over a long period of trading, removing those really bad mistakes can make a big difference. So I think that's where you want to focus with discipline. That's my opinion.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. And so the danger here, I suppose, from my point of view, is that somebody who's new to trading is listening to this and going, yeah, I get it. And they want to run off and open it up and allow themselves to have more freedom to, to go hog wild. And I guess I'm just wondering if that's like, how do you draw the line? Like, how do you know, okay, I should allow myself more freedom and enable myself more latitude in my trading decisions versus someone who should not? Is it just as simple as, are you making money? Are you consistently making money? Or like, how would you know? Because I think that's the critical piece to me in this, is that we're saying that you should take the information that you're getting and you should incorporate that into your trading decisions instead of being so rigid. But at the same time, there's a place for that rigidity and there's a utility, especially if you're new to trading. So how do you know if you're someone who needs a little bit more discipline versus someone who needs a little bit more, broaden the scope of what's possible in terms of what you can do in your trading?
I think really it has to come through, trial and error and, time and experience, really. But I would never say to anyone, don't go hog wild, because, don't go hog wild with all of your money in your account. Go hog wild on a demo and learn about yourself. Find out what really ticks for you, and make your own rules up about trading. The kind of the spectrum of ideas that is put forward that we have to trade with is so narrow. But if you read about successful traders, they go out there and, you know, they're breaking rules, they're doing stuff their own way, and, you know, ultimately, I suppose that's going to be the easiest way to be successful at it, is to really, you know, explore a bit, throw all your rules out, start from scratch, forget everything, and just find out about what feels right for you, and then build some structure around that when you kind of understand more of yourself as a trader.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, I guess for me, that's the key here, is that's good advice to actually allow yourself to kind of go too far and then see maybe you can rein it back in. I think it's really valuable to have a trading buddy. And that's one of the things I've been trying to do with people who want to be matched up with a trading buddy, you know, in the private forum. I've tried to find people a good match. And I think this is a really good exercise. If you can find someone that, you know, you can talk to and show them what you've been doing, just having that other person see and seeing what they have from their perspective can be useful. And some of you listening right here are probably thinking, you know what, I'm too advanced for that. I don't need a trading buddy. I'm already doing well or whatever. But one of the things I've noticed is that when you do this exercise, when you match these people up, sometimes what ends up happening is the more experienced trader who's kind of going into the relationship going, I don't know why I'm really doing this. The more experienced trader actually ends up learning more and getting more out of it than the newbie trader. So, you know, it's something that I think is worthwhile, especially given that, you know, if you're going to get to the point, if you want to get to the point where you can actually take information from the market and process it, it's very helpful to see how other people would take that same information and process it. And an easy way to do that is just to meet up with another trader every week, go over your trades, talk about what you've done, what, you know, your thoughts about what you did, and see what they have to say, see what the other person has to say. I think that's a really useful exercise for those of you that are, you know, looking for concrete ways to improve, you know, based on what we've talked about today, which is basically the discipline or lack of discipline in your trading.
Yeah, I get a lot of benefit from putting my trades out there and people questioning, you know, why did you do that? Because it just makes me stop and think before, you know, it's just another level of you know, me sort of reflecting on what I'm doing, you know, because I'm going to be sharing it with other people, and, you know, thinking, you know, is this kind of in line with what I'm, you know, my goal is and my trading structure.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate it, Darren, and I'd like to leave with the quote from, I think it was George Soros said, because it reminded me of what you were saying when you said, you know, some of the best traders they do go hog wild, and you're probably thinking of George Soros when he said it takes courage to be a pig. So he's basically saying there's certain opportunities that will present themselves, and when that happens, you just need to go in. And I don't know if I necessarily would do this, but you know, where, you know, like, you know, typically it's like once in a lifetime or twice in a lifetime situations where you just go, okay, this is it. We're going to go all in on this one, and it seems a little bit crazy. But if you're so convinced that you're right, you might as well go down like you know what I mean? You might as well go down with your ego.
Yeah, I like that quote. I'm probably the least read trader on the planet. I've read so few trading books that I don't know all these great quotes. But yeah, I mean, he's kind of talking about, you know, using your feelings and your context again. You know, if you feel that if something's happened that makes you feel that this trade's suddenly a lot better than it was, then, you know, maybe you should use that information.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks for your time, Darren. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. Cheers, Walter. Bye.